In the heart of Beaumont, Texas, two brothers were born into a world that never quite knew what to make of them. Being albinos made them stand out, but their talent and love for music would take them farther than anyone there could have ever imagined. Johnny and Edgar Winter weren't just brothers, they were a force, a double-barrel blast of southern grit and raw blues power that set stages on fire and left audiences breathless. Johnny, with his lightning-fast guitar licks and gravel road voice, was an embodiment of rock and roll rebellion. Edgar, the multi-instrumentalist prodigy, brought soul, swagger, and an experimental edge to everything from blues to jazz to rock. Together, they tore down barriers, musical and personal, and carved out their own space in a music industry. They shared the stage many times, but they walked separate paths. Their bond was undeniable, but so was their independence. And while one chased the purity of the blues, the other pushed boundaries with fearless musical innovation. This is a story of two brothers who refused to be defined by limitations, and instead rewrote the rules of American music. So let's take a look back on a few of those stories. The Winter boys were brought up in a home full of music. Both of the boys' parents played and sang, and it didn't take them long to fit right in. Johnny was born almost 3 years before his younger brother Edgar came along. They would both start out on the ukulele, and Edgar remembers them playing and singing together on Everly Brothers songs. As the boys grew, Johnny would switch over to the guitar, but Edgar would play anything and everything he touched. His mother taught him the piano, his father had an alto sax, and Edgar picked that up. And when Johnny started a band, Edgar was there to play whatever was needed, even the bass guitar or drums. The first band was called Johnny and the Jammers, where Edgar and Johnny recruited a few of the neighborhood boys to join, and they would play parties after the school's football games, local dances, and church socials. But this was just a start for the Winter brothers, as they would soon start touring clubs all over the South. Edgar recalls those early years by saying, "We had very different approaches to music. Johnny was very ambitious and he was outgoing. He was Johnny Cool Daddy Winter with the sunglasses, pompadour hair, and the guitar. Johnny always watched Bandstand and read all the magazines. He's the one that dreamed of becoming a star. For me, I was a strange kid that played all the different instruments. I started out on the ukulele, and then Johnny graduated to the guitar, and then I started playing electric bass, and then I switched to electric piano. I played drums for a while. Then in high school, I got interested in horns, and I found my dad's old alto sax in the attic and learned to play alto, tenor, baritone, and soprano sax. I also played a little trumpet and trombone. There is no doubt Edgar was a very talented multi-instrumentalist. Edgar says Ray Charles was his most profound musical influence, and he had a great horn band. He said he learned to arrange from one of his piano teachers who taught him how to read and write music. The brothers walked a bit different paths when it came to the blues. Johnny loved old school Delta style like Muddy Waters, Lightning Hopkins, and Howlin' Wolf. Edgar leaned toward what he called the urban or city style blues like Ray Charles and B.B. King. One way that the Winter brothers was different, Edgar loved horns, and Johnny didn't. But that didn't stop them. Even though they felt differently, they worked well together. Now we come up to 1968, the year before Woodstock, and Johnny caught a break, which would in turn also be a break for his little brother Edgar. Johnny had released his first album in the progressive blues experiment. He recorded it in August 1968 at the Vulcan Gas Company, a club in Austin, Texas, with his original trio of Tommy Shannon on bass and Uncle John Turner on drums. The album features a mix of Winter originals and older blues songs, including the standards Rollin' and Tumblin', Help Me, and 44. In December of 1968, an article came out in Rolling Stone magazine about Johnny, and it kicked his career into high gear. It described him as a 130-pound cross-eyed albino with long fleecy hair playing some of the guttiest fluid blues guitar you ever heard. This feature was his stepping stone that led to a major record deal with Columbia Records. Johnny signed the record deal with Columbia and recorded his self-titled album and later another titled Second Winter. Now this is where Edgar came in to help Johnny and got his musical break. I've never seen Edgar credited for playing on the first self-titled album, but he does have credits on Second Winter. Now here's how Edgar explained this and how he got his deal. He said, Johnny invited me to play on his first couple of albums, so I came to New York, and through his manager, Steve Paul, I met Clive Davis, who was the president of CBS at the time, and Clive offered me a record deal, and as they say, the rest is history. Now before the record deal, Edgar said that playing in his brother's band at Woodstock is what really opened his eyes. He said, we did Woodstock together, which was in 1969, and that really changed my life. That was when I started to write. Up to that point, I had thought of music as my own, almost my own personal private world. See, as a kid, that was a place that I could always find like a sense of love and security and well-being because it was associated with family. But when I played Woodstock, I realized the great spiritual dimensions of music in seeing all the artists that had written and were performing songs that they really believed in. It was a really unique time, both musically and culturally, and it made me realize that the music is really a universal language, that regardless of who you are or where you come from, it can reach everyone. It was at this time the seed was planted for him, and he wanted to be more than just a sideman instrumentalist. The song Dying to Live, which was on the White Trash album, was inspired by Edgar's Woodstock experience. The whole album was just a great piece of work. It was produced by the late great Rick Derringer, who worked with both Johnny and Edgar at times, producing, writing songs, and playing guitar at times. All of the songs on that album, except for one, was written by Edgar and his longtime friend Jerry LaCrosse. The one song not written by them was I Got News for You, which was recorded by Ray Charles in the early 60s, and Brother Johnny appeared on the White Trash album to play guitar on this number. Here's a story about Johnny and his album Second Winter. The great producer Eddie Kramer was hired for the project. Eddie had produced albums for some of the greats of rock, Zeppelin, Hendrix, the Stones, and Kiss, just to name a few. But about halfway through this album, Johnny fired him, saying he wasn't doing his job. He was outside the studio recording rainstorm sounds for effects. So we fired him midstream, leaving me and Edgar to finish the job of producing and recording the album. The brothers worked together many times throughout their careers, recording and playing live shows. Although both would carry their own bands, their bond in life and music would stay strong, even though they both took different roads to get there. And along those roads came the drugs. Johnny and Edgar were both into it. Johnny became addicted to heroin. He finally decided to seek help. It was very strange the way people treated me after getting real big, Johnny said. The way people treated me was weird. Being worshipped is not fun. Being appreciated is great, but being worshipped is not good. It was a lot of pressure. Everybody knew who I was. It was what I had wanted, so I couldn't complain. When I figured out I was addicted to heroin, I couldn't stand it. I wanted to die. So I checked myself into rehab and was there about 9 months. Johnny always said that if he could change something in his life, it would be that he would not have started on heroin. He said he started doing it just because he wasn't feeling good about things and heroin made him feel better. Johnny had a problem with all the fans coming around. Deep down, Johnny's a private person, and once he made it big, that all changed, and so did he. Johnny kicked the addiction by going to rehab for 9 months. Back then, there wasn't clinics like they have now, and doctors didn't know a lot about treatment. I've never heard him say exactly what or how his treatments were done, although I do know Johnny was taking methadone most all of his life, and his drinking increased a lot after the rehab. Edgar said, "I'm thankful to have survived that. I went through my drug phase just like everybody else. For a long time, everybody we knew did drugs. Our normal mode of operation was to see how many different kind of drugs we could ingest and still get out there and play. We did festivals high on acid and mescaline. I did heroin. I did everything that was out there. At a certain point, when people started to die, a lot of the great jazz players, my idols, like Charlie Parker, became addicted. When Jimmy and Janis died, it really became very real to me that it was an ever-present danger. I was out of it. I knew I was going to quit. I ended up quitting everything. I don't even smoke cigarettes or pot anymore." Edgar is now 78 years old and still has tour dates on his calendar. Johnny, as I said, had trouble with methadone and alcohol after his rehab, and it took him a long time to totally clean up. And Johnny passed away at age 70 in 2014. He was still active playing gigs at the time of his death. So, how did Edgar come up with the idea of strapping a keyboard on himself? And why would he do it? He said, "The synthesizer and my association with the keyboard, I think it's a very dynamic sort of image that people came to associate me with. I was the first guy to have the idea of putting a strap on the keyboard and playing it like a guitar. And that was like a new innovation back at the time. I just happened to be the first one to think of it. You know, it was frustrating being stuck behind a massive bank of keyboards. So when I was in the music store one day, I said, wow, look at that new synthesizer. This is pretty light. Looks like you could just put a strap on and play it." So I did just that. I know this video is about the Winter brothers, but I think giving Rick Derringer a quick look here and what he meant to both brothers is appropriate. Edgar had a lot to say about Rick Derringer. "Rick is part of our extended family," he said. "He played in my first band, White Trash, after the original guitarist Floyd Rayford left. He then played with me in the Edgar Winter group, after the original guitarist Ronnie Montrose left the band. Rick produced a lot of my early albums as well. We've been fast friends for years. Rick played with Johnny first, but when Johnny had to take a break and go into rehab, he sent Rick my way. So I write this with heavy heart, yet one filled with so many memories. Yesterday, on May 26th, I lost a dear friend and bandmate. And the world lost one of the greatest guitarists and writers in rock and roll, Rick Derringer. Rick was one of the most gifted, versatile, and adaptable guitarists I have ever had the honor and pleasure of working with. He was a kindred spirit who loved and understood all music, but especially Johnny's and mine. His positive energy both on and off the stage with our bands, Johnny Winter and White Trash and the Edgar Winter Group, gave us and the world moments to treasure for all time. I say farewell for now, but never forever. Here's a couple more videos you might enjoy. Thanks for watching, and hit the like button for me if you would, and leave a comment with your thoughts on Edgar and Johnny, and even Rick Derringer.